The loud applause echoing through that beautiful new home should have filled me with pride, yet every clap felt like another reminder that the truth had been carefully buried beneath polished smiles and expensive decorations. While dozens of guests celebrated my only son for reaching what they believed was the greatest achievement of his life, I stood quietly beside my wife, knowing that the foundation beneath that house had been built with years of our sacrifices, yet our names were never spoken. My name is Leonard Harper, and I am 68 years old after spending more than 4 decades operating a small roofing company in the peaceful town of Franklin, Tennessee. My wife Evelyn and I never cared about luxury or recognition because we believed that real success was measured by the opportunities we could create for our family, even if nobody ever noticed the long hours, sleepless nights, and personal dreams we quietly gave away along the journey. Our only child was a son named Ethan, and from the day he entered our lives, we treated him like the greatest blessing we had ever received after many heartbreaking years of believing we might never become parents. Looking back now, I sometimes wonder if our endless desire to protect him slowly convinced him that every difficult problem would eventually disappear because his mother and father would always step forward before life forced him to face the consequences himself. Whenever Ethan struggled with tuition during college, we found another way to cover the bills without making him feel embarrassed. And when his first car finally stopped running, I quietly replaced it, without asking for anything in return, because seeing him move forward mattered more than watching my savings account grow. Even after he married a confident young woman named Natalie, Evelyn and I happily paid for most of their wedding, while Natalie's wealthy relatives accepted endless compliments from guests, who naturally assumed they had made the celebration possible. Several years later, Ethan and Natalie discovered a beautiful property overlooking a quiet lake just outside the growing city of Asheville, North Carolina, and they excitedly invited us over one Sunday afternoon to share the news about what they believed would become their forever home. Their excitement slowly turned into worry as Ethan admitted they had qualified for the mortgage but had fallen painfully short of the amount needed to secure the purchase, and before he even finished explaining the situation, I could already see the silent hope in his eyes because he expected me to rescue the dream just as I always had before. Evelyn looked across the dining table without saying a single word. Yet after more than 40 years of marriage, I understood exactly what her gentle expression meant because she had the same compassionate look every time our son needed help. I transferred $200,000 into Ethan's account a few days later so the purchase could move forward without delays, then reminded him that money could build a house, but only gratitude and honesty could turn it into a true family home. For the first month, Ethan called almost every evening with exciting updates about fresh paint, new flooring, landscaping, ideas, and every small improvement they completed, making Evelyn smile every time another photo appeared on her phone. As the weeks passed, those conversations became shorter and less frequent, and before long, nearly every story involved Natalie's parents selecting furniture, recommending decorators, hosting gatherings, or introducing contractors as though they alone were responsible for creating the beautiful life unfolding inside those walls. One afternoon, Evelyn received a digital invitation to the official housewarming celebration, and the message felt strangely distant because it sounded more like a formal announcement sent to casual acquaintances than a heartfelt invitation meant for loving parents. She quietly closed her phone before disappearing into her sewing room, where she spent several evenings finishing a handcrafted memory blanket stitched with Ethan and Natalie's wedding date, hoping such a personal gift would remind them that love could never be measured by money alone. When the evening of the celebration finally arrived, the house looked stunning with elegant lighting, fresh flowers, and tasteful decorations that made every room resemble something from the pages of an expensive design magazine, while guests laughed comfortably as if they had belonged there from the very beginning. Natalie's father welcomed visitors near the entrance with remarkable confidence and spoke proudly about every detail of the property, leaving many people with the impression that he had personally guided the young couple through every important decision that transformed the building into their dream home. As Evelyn carefully handed the handmade blanket to Natalie, she offered a warm smile and quietly explained how many months had been spent sewing every stitch with love and hope for their future together, expecting nothing more than a simple moment of appreciation. Natalie thanked her politely before passing the folded blanket to Ethan with barely a glance and asking him to place it somewhere out of the way, and I watched my wife hide the disappointment in her eyes while pretending that such a painful dismissal had never happened. Dinner began shortly after sunset as nearly 50 guests gathered throughout the spacious home, filling every room with cheerful conversations, laughter, and compliments about how successful Ethan and Natalie had become in such a short time. I recognized only a handful of faces because most of the crowd consisted of Natalie's relatives, business associates, and longtime family friends who comfortably acted as though they had watched this dream grow from the very beginning. After everyone had finished eating, Ethan gently tapped his glass to capture the attention of the room, then wrapped one arm around Natalie while thanking everyone for celebrating such an unforgettable milestone with them. He spoke warmly about loyalty, encouragement, and the importance of family before turning toward Natalie's parents and declaring that their wisdom, generosity, and unwavering support had made the entire journey possible, causing the room to erupt into enthusiastic applause while every pair of eyes focused on them with admiration. I slowly turned toward Evelyn and saw her staring silently at her untouched dessert, while forcing herself to remain composed, yet I recognized the quiet heartbreak she tried so desperately to hide behind a calm expression after decades of knowing every emotion written across her face. Ethan never once looked in our direction during his speech, and that painful realization settled inside me with a strange sense of finality, because being forgotten by your own child leaves a wound far deeper than any angry argument ever could. Without interrupting the celebration, I gently reached for Evelyn's hand and quietly told her it was time for us to leave, because there was nothing left for us to say in a room where gratitude had been replaced by appearances and public approval. Ethan noticed us walking toward the front door and casually asked if we were leaving so soon, and I simply congratulated him on the beautiful home before wishing everyone a pleasant evening and closing the door behind us without creating a scene that would only embarrass ourselves. The drive home was almost completely silent except for the faint sound of Evelyn trying to hold back tears while watching the city lights disappear beyond the car window, and every mile seemed heavier than the one before, because neither of us had expected to feel like strangers in the life we had spent decades helping our son build. After we reached home, Evelyn quietly went upstairs while I entered my study and unlocked a small cabinet containing every financial record connected to the house purchase, never imagining that the documents I had nearly ignored months earlier were about to change everything that followed. Inside the folder were bank transfers, financial statements, email conversations, and one carefully prepared agreement that my longtime attorney, Rebecca Lawson, had insisted I use before sending such a large amount of money, even though I had argued that legal paperwork should never exist between a father and his only son. Rebecca had patiently explained that clear documentation protected everyone involved from future misunderstandings, and although I reluctantly accepted her advice at the time, I never imagined those forgotten pages would someday become the strongest evidence of a painful truth. Early the next morning, I called Rebecca and calmly described everything that had happened during the celebration, expecting little more than professional advice about how to move forward with our family. She listened without interrupting before quietly revealing that a representative from the mortgage company had contacted her office several days earlier to confirm the origin of the funds, because Ethan and Natalie had officially declared that the money used to purchase the property had been provided entirely by Natalie's parents, instead of by me. For several long moments I could not find the right words, because the betrayal reached far beyond an insulting speech, turning into a written falsehood that had become part of legal financial records and placed my own reputation at unnecessary risk. Rebecca explained that the signed agreement gave me every right to correct the documentation and formally establish my financial interest if the money had been intentionally misrepresented. Then she gently asked whether I truly wanted to begin that difficult process, despite knowing it could permanently change my relationship with my son. After sitting quietly beside the window where the morning sunlight filled my office, I realized that remaining silent would only reward dishonesty while teaching Ethan that appearances mattered more than integrity. So I instructed Rebecca to move forward with every legal step necessary to correct the official record. Before noon, the lender received updated documentation explaining the true source of the funds, and Rebecca also filed the paperwork preserving my financial rights exactly as the original agreement allowed if the circumstances required such protection. Only a few hours later, my phone rang repeatedly until I finally answered, and the fear in Ethan's voice immediately revealed that the bank had already contacted him about the discrepancies discovered in the mortgage documents before he could invent another explanation. He desperately insisted that everything had been nothing more than a harmless misunderstanding created to avoid uncomfortable questions from friends and relatives, but I calmly reminded him that honesty never damages a family, while pride built upon deception eventually destroys the very people trying hardest to protect it. Later that afternoon, Ethan and Natalie arrived at our front porch, looking nothing like the confident couple who had proudly welcomed guests into their elegant home. Only days earlier, because worry had replaced their smiles and the weight of their decisions was finally visible on their faces, Evelyn answered the door with quiet dignity and invited them inside after a long pause where the silence filling our living room forced everyone to confront the truth they had spent weeks trying to avoid. Ethan apologized with tears in his eyes for allowing gratitude to disappear behind his desire to impress other people, while Natalie admitted that pretending her parents had financed the purchase seemed easier than explaining that they had accepted such extraordinary help from mine. I listened carefully before telling them that mistakes could always be forgiven when they came from poor judgment, but deliberate dishonesty became far more dangerous because it slowly erased trust, respect, and the foundation that every healthy family depended upon. Together with Rebecca, we completed the corrected financial documents and arranged a fair repayment schedule that Ethan willingly accepted, not because I desperately needed the money, but because accepting responsibility would teach him a lesson that no lecture ever could. The mortgage remained secure after the records were corrected, yet the experience left a permanent reminder that the strongest homes are built with honesty instead of appearances, and every monthly payment became another step toward rebuilding the trust that had nearly been lost forever. Several weeks later, Ethan returned alone carrying the handmade blanket that Evelyn had lovingly sewn with countless hours of patience, and this time, he carefully unfolded it across our dining table while admitting that hiding such a meaningful gift had become one of the greatest regrets of his life. Evelyn gently touched the carefully stitched fabric before embracing her son with tears in her eyes, and although complete forgiveness would require time, we finally saw genuine humility replacing the pride that had once blinded him. Today that blanket hangs proudly in the center of their family room where every visitor can see the love that truly helped create their home, and Ethan now understands that real success is never measured by public applause, but by the people who quietly stand beside you when nobody else is watching. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.